Hey guys, Hidden Truths here. Welcome to this new video with a bunch of new stories. I'm trying to hit 10,000 subscribers and I think we can do it with your help. So please subscribe. It would honestly mean a lot to me. Now, let's get right into the stories. Rain drummed the metal canopy above mile 41 like 1,000 hurried fingers, and the station lighting, single tungsten tubes glowing amber through mist, made everything shimmer as though underwater. I stepped off the late shuttle from the city, shoulders hunched against the chill, coat collar pulled so high the wool scratched my jaw. Tuesday nights, I belonged to this platform. One suitcase, one dark suit, one unspoken dread of the dawn meeting that always awaited across 300 miles of track. I would have boarded the sleeper without a sideways glance if a sudden splash of vermilion hadn't snagged my peripheral vision. A woman's scarf whipping in the wind, bright as a flare. She was 40 feet down the platform, standing beneath the timetable board, studying her ticket with the fierce concentration of someone solving a private riddle. Brown hair twisted into a loose knot, rain streaking stray strands across her cheek. Something in the tilt of her shoulders tugged at memory. Art room turpentine, cherry-red Doc Martens, a laugh that once turned every hollow space inside me into a cathedral. An impossible resemblance, I told myself. Ghosts rarely wait for commuter trains. Still, I watched her from behind the glassed-in vending kiosk, heat coils humming at my back while cold gusts riddled the platform beyond. The sleeper hissed into view, brakes exhaling plumes that blended with the weather. I moved forward as doors slid apart and passengers shuffled through the vapor. The woman, my apparition, chose carriage F, the very compartment I'd reserved out of habit for its proximity to the buffet car. Coincidence, of course, but my pulse tripped anyway. Before sense could intervene, I stepped in behind her. Inside, the carriage smelled of damp overcoats, diesel, and the faint citrus polish the rail company used to pretend their leather seats were still real hide. She placed her bag overhead, then turned, smiling an apology that dissolved the years between us. Up close, the likeness sharpened into certainty beneath the station fluorescence. Emilia Hart, the first person who ever dared to see art in my awkward silences. The woman I ghosted one winter midnight during finals when my father's blunt warnings about unstable creative types rang louder than my own desire. 22 years ago. A lifetime. Yet here she was, with rain on her lashes. I offered a brief nod, polite commuter recognition, while my stomach lurched like a train coupling misaligned. She didn't flinch, didn't stare. Perhaps memory sheltered me. I thanked that possibility and slid into a seat 2 rows behind, hoping distance would prune temptation. As the train lurched forward and the station lights retreated into blurred gold streaks, I opened my laptop, the familiar spreadsheet blooming to life, a forest of red-amber risk indicators waiting for me to tame them into morning briefings the board could swallow without indigestion. Numbers were refuge. They never smelt of linseed oil or risked asking why I traded dreams for stability. Rain tracked sideways across the double-paned window. Thunder rolled like heavy freight somewhere beyond the cuttings. I tried to drown in work, but my reflection drifted over the glass, 50 pounds heavier than that reckless art student, hair recessing at the temples, eyes carrying the grayscale of fluorescent office corridors. Behind the ghost of my face, I saw Emilia's profile, earphones plugged, sketchbook balanced on her knees, pencil moving in quick slashes. My gut tightened. I hadn't drawn in nearly 2 decades. She rose an hour later, brushing past my arm toward the buffet car. Her perfume, something citrus tinged with pepper, stole my focus from the risk projections on screen. "Just say hello," a voice urged. But the memory of absence rewound. Her unanswered calls, letters stacked in my dorm mailbox, each stamped with bright postage and desperation I pretended not to sense. Guilt was a stubborn archivist. It kept everything pristine. Minutes stretched. My eyelids drooped to the lullaby of rail joints. Ta-kunk, until Emilia returned, carrying 2 paper cups, steam curling like invitation. She paused beside my seat. "Long night," she said softly, balancing the cups as though offering peace rather than caffeine. Her gaze lingered on my face, polite inquiry, no spark of recognition. I swallowed. "Looks like it," I replied, and she smiled the kind of half-smile strangers trade when the world feels wetter than it ought. She slid into the seat opposite mine, empty until now, setting 1 cup before me. "They gave me an extra by mistake," she explained, though we both knew buffet staff rarely miscount. I wanted to refuse, but the warmth prickled my palms and something rebellious in me latched on. Steam clouded my glasses. Her reflection replaced the spreadsheets. The train plunged into a tunnel, lights flicker-maggard, and my pulse hammered as years blurred. Sleepy studio afternoons, Emilia smearing paint across my knuckles, telling me color belonged on skin as much as canvas. In that black-lit moment, I nearly said her name. The tunnel spat us into night again. Emilia sipped her drink, eyes tracing the rain raceways outside. "Always loved storms," she murmured, voice more to herself than me. Lightning stitched the clouds, illuminating her features. Older, yes, but the same angular grace. A memory surfaced. Her telling me she painted best when thunder rattled the windows, claiming electricity primed the heart. I gripped the cup tighter, scalding my fingers, desperate for pain rooted in the present. She glanced at my laptop. "Work never sleeps?" I forced a chuckle. "Not if risk models have their say." She nodded as though accustomed to strangers' confessions. "Good to have constants," she said, but the words felt like a pebble skimming deep water. Ripples destined to return. Announcements crackled overhead. Service delay, storm damage up the line, arrival pushed 2 hours. Passengers groaned. Emilia met my gaze, sympathy flickering. "Looks like we're fellow night owls longer than expected." Then, gently, she added, "I'm Emilia." My breath caught. She offered her hand, polite, completely blank slate. It took every practiced boardroom muscle to summon a smile and reply, "Mark." I shook her hand, heat threading from her fingertips to every regret I'd shelved. As the carriage settled into resigned murmurs and the storm hammered louder, I let my real name sit between us like a ticking grace period, wondering how long before recognition exploded the fragile civility. And beneath the wheels, rail joints kept time, carrying us deeper into a night I suddenly feared would have too much memory for shelter. Thunder kept pace with the locomotive, rolling along the carriage roof in bass rumbles that made the window panes jitter against their rubbers. Every few minutes, lightning unveiled a blurred countryside. Skeletal trees, flooding ditches, the spectral glint of distant silos. Inside, reading lamps cast syrupy pools of light that never quite met the aisle, so the corridor looked like a river of dusk. Emilia and I sat across from each other in that wavering glow, our shared table scattered with the polite debris of strangers. Paper cups, a phone charging on a power strip, my laptop muted on its lock screen. I pretended to watch the storm, but studied her reflection instead, tracing how concentration furrowed her brow as she sketched. Her pencil seemed to translate vibration into graphite, setting down jagged lines that echoed the train's shudder. At intervals, she lifted her eyes, meeting mine in the glass, and I felt a tremor of exposure. Perhaps she merely checked composition, but guilt twisted every glance into interrogation. I retreated to spreadsheets again, highlighting cells, adjusting coefficients for supply chain volatility that had no bearing on the pulse pounding my ears. Numbers blurred. Emilia's voice slipped between them. "You travel this line often?" she asked, without looking up, tone casual. I cleared my throat, pushed the glasses higher on my nose. "Weekly, jobs in Northport, family south." She nodded and shaded a corner of the page. "Must know every sleeper attendant by name." I offered a practiced laugh, thin as the coffee had been, and tried to ignore how her remark implied a cataloging of my habits. The train slowed, wheels shrieking protest as it crossed a flooded viaduct. We lurched, water slapped the undercarriage. Luggage shifted in racks, Emilia's pencil skidded, leaving an unintended slash. "You okay?" I asked, immediately regretting the intimacy threaded through 2 words. She flipped the page, choosing to abandon the marred drawing. "Storm's making the track feel alive," she said, eyes lingering on me a moment longer than necessary. Lightning flashed again. Her pupils pinpointed, revealing irises the color of wet beach glass. Recognition flickered there, something sharpening. My chest tightened. To occupy my hands, I opened the complimentary packet of biscuits the steward had left earlier, offering one across the table. She accepted, brushed crumbs off her sketchbook, and asked, "What takes you to Northport?" "If I can pry." "Risk analysis," I replied, swallowing a dry mouthful. "I audit possibilities, supply shortages, cyber breaches, executive mishaps, and package them into palatable metrics." A wry smile curved her lips. "Quantifying uncertainty. Poetic, in its way." She broke the biscuit in half, gaze drifting to my left hand where the gold band glinted beneath fluorescent hum. "And quantifying happiness? Ever run that algorithm?" The question wasn't flirtatious. It was almost clinical, but heat crawled under my collar all the same. "Out of scope," I murmured, hoping the dimness hid the flush rising. We rode in silence while rain battered the roof like thrown gravel. The delay lengthened. An announcement explained that a semaphore relay ahead had flooded. Engineers would guide us manually across the marsh stretch. Passengers groaned anew. The air smelled increasingly of wet wool and impatience, but Emilia seemed composed, as though the night expanded exactly to her purpose. She tucked a loose strand behind her ear and resumed drawing. This time, subtly, her pencil traced the curve of my shoulder, the slope of my jaw. I recognized the posture from college nights when she sketched me reading in the dorm window. I felt suddenly naked in my conservative suit. She spoke while the graphite whispered, "Ever visit the coast beyond Northport? Limestone cliffs, sea campion flowering along the edge?" "Rarely," I admitted. "Work stays inland." "Pity," she said, shading my silhouette. "It's healing there. I'm heading for the cliffs at first light." I glimpsed a metal urn peeking from her tote bag. Brushed steel, etched roses. Grief tugged her expression for a heartbeat before composure returned. "I'm carrying my mother home," she added, voice soft but steady. I lowered my gaze, understanding coalescing with unease. Emilia's mother had lectured printmaking at our college. I recalled her wild gray braid, her critiques that stung and illuminated simultaneously. Lightning erupted again, strobing the carriage. Emilia's pencil paused midway through a stroke, eyes fixed on my face. "You remind me of someone," she murmured. I managed a non-committal hum. She leaned closer, studying the faint scar above my eyebrow, courtesy of a freshman bike crash she had once nursed with ice cubes stolen from the dorm cafeteria. Her breath caught. Recognition locked in. Mark Ellison. My name floated between us, equal parts wonder and accusation. The train seemed to shiver at the revelation. Heartbeat hammering, I forced a calm sip of lukewarm tea. "You have a good memory," I said, though my voice cracked on memory. She closed the sketchbook slowly. "Some names stay printed inside, even when the inks run." Her gaze searched mine for apology, explanation, perhaps penance. I found none prepared. 22 years of evasions collapsed like tin. The carriage lights dimmed. Steward call buttons winked crimson along the aisle. Outside, the storm reached crescendo, wind bellowing across open marsh. Emilia folded her hands atop the closed sketchbook. "When this train stops," she said quietly, "I'm walking to the cliff with or without company. but it won't hurt to have a second pair of hands for the urn. Old friend duty, if you like." She left the invitation suspended, neither gracious nor reproachful, simply factual. I stared at the dark window where our reflections merged with flashing swamp water, thinking of the sterile boardroom awaiting my 9 a.m. presentation, my children's unanswered text messages from cello practice, the yawning gulf inside a marriage grown efficient. Lightning cracked again, framing my silhouette inside hers like overlaid transparencies. She lowered her voice. "There's room for truth before dawn, Mark." I opened my mouth, but the train lurched violently, throwing luggage and passengers alike. Overhead lights flickered out completely, plunging us into storm-lit darkness. Somewhere in carriage G, a bottle shattered. Someone screamed. The engine ground to a halt, metallic shriek echoing across flooded flats, then an alarming silence descended, broken only by wind and the frantic ping of the emergency bell. In that breathless void, Emilia reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. Steady, warm, deliberate. "Tell me why," she whispered, lightning silencing the rest. And as pitch black swallowed us, my rehearsed excuses scattered like sparks into the rain-soaked night, leaving only the raw howl of an approaching reckoning. Emergency lumens flickered to life, thin orange bands along the carriage skirting, turning every face a mask of clay. Rain hammered the stalled roof in unbroken sheets, 1,000 pins on tin. The air smelled of spilled coffee and a faint metallic taint from the friction-hot brakes. I sat motionless, Emilia's hand still resting on the back of mine, its warmth the only steady metric in a cabin now calibrated by panic breaths and urgent phone screens searching for signal. She withdrew after a moment, folding her fingers together, but the imprint lingered like voltage. A guard leaned through the doorway, announced that flood sensors had tripped. Engineers would walk the line to ensure the track ahead hadn't vanished beneath the marsh. 2 hours, maybe 3. Groans rippled, but I felt an unexpected slackening inside, as though time, so tyrannical in my daily schedules, had finally agreed to pause. Emilia slid sideways on her seat until our knees almost touched. "We have darkness to spare," she said, voice carrying the ghost of a dare. "I'd still like to know why you went silent that winter." Thunder growled in tacit encouragement. My instinct was to default to actuarial language, unforeseen pressures, risk redistribution, but she deserved nouns with flesh. I inhaled slowly, counting out beats the way I measured residual exposure at work. "I broke," I said at last. "My father cornered me between semesters, showed me ledger columns, tuition debts, the reality of scholarships that vanish with bad grades. He called you volatile potential, said I was hitching myself to someone who painted feelings instead of earning them. I was afraid he was right, and empire building seemed easier than uncertainty." I paused, throat tight. "I told myself no goodbye would hurt you less than a partial one." Lightning revealed the planes of her face, no anger, only melancholy patience, as though she'd rehearsed this confession years in advance. She exhaled through her nose. "Silence isn't an anesthetic, Mark. It's a scalpel you leave in the wound." Her words sliced cleanly, but the cut felt honest. She opened her tote, drew out the metal urn. Light kissed the engraved roses, beads of water still freckling its surface. "Mom died 3 weeks ago. Heart went like a street lamp, one blink, then dark. She asked to be scattered where she first painted plein air at Loudon Cliffs. Sunrise was her favorite pigment." Emilia traced the lid with her thumb. "I thought I'd have company, but my brother's stuck in Tokyo, so it's just me, and an ocean that keeps no secrets." The urn's presence compressed the space, made every other passenger fade to background extras. I asked, "You live near the cliffs now?" She shook her head. "I teach printmaking in the city, night trains save hotel fees. Her gaze wandered to my laptop. You still draw? I almost laughed, an artifact of another life entombed inside office cubicles. Last sketch I attempted became a flowchart, I said. She smiled. Sad but genuine. Figures. A burst of memory dislodged. The two of us crouched on cold dorm tiles, experimenting with monotype prints, Emilia pressing my ink-smeared palms to newsprint, declaring them maps of possibility. I recalled the thrill at imagining roads not yet paved, and the equal terror that none would guarantee a pension. The recollection throbbed like a struck bell. Around us, passengers settled into resigned quiet. Someone's Bluetooth speaker leaked muffled jazz, while a mother hummed lullabies to a child wrapped in a puffy coat. The train's diesel generator thrummed beneath the floor, an artificial heart. I ran a hand through my hair. My life's become one long PowerPoint, I admitted. Slide transitions pass for progress. At home, I'm a ghost who signs consent forms for field trips and furnace inspections. Saying it aloud felt like drafting my own risk report. Probability of regret, certain. Severity, terminal. Emilia rested her elbow on the tabletop, the urn cradled against her ribs the way others hold a book of prayers. Then why stay on this train tomorrow? You could step off with me at Loudon Glen. No spreadsheets there, only goals. Her words were not seduction, more a hypothesis offered for peer review. Yet an image flared. Dawn wind off the channel, cliff grass hissing, ash turning to quicksilver ribbons in sunbeams. The picture stirred a hunger I'd starved so long it ached like fresh growth. But behind that vision marched consequences. Spouse, children, a mortgage, the team expecting my risk matrices by 10. Stability had become my deity. Deserting now might fracture more than my reputation. Still, the house I'd built felt suddenly like one of those glass paperweights, solid, decorative, and sealing its snowstorm in perpetual suspension. Emilia must have sensed the seesaw. It doesn't have to be dramatic, she said softly. You could stand a while, help me lift the lid, watch the sea carry her, then catch the commuter back. Life resumes, but maybe you'd return with a real memory, not just the outline of one. Her eyes held mine, clear, steady, forgiving yet unsentimental. The guard walked by again, updating. Line inspection progressing, estimated departure in 90 minutes. He moved on, leaving us suspended in liminal hours thick with hydraulic hiss and rain static. An elderly man shuffled past toward the lavatory, muttering about arthritis. Somewhere a phone rang unanswered. Normality attempted its re-entry, but the carriage still smelled different. Charged, expectant. I opened my wallet, slid out the photo tucked behind insurance cards. My kids at last summer's lake, arms thrown over my shoulders while I forced a grin for my wife's camera. The image shimmered in emergency glow, happiness slightly out of focus. Emilia watched without comment. I returned it, feeling the weight of dual realities. I owe them presents, I said, almost to myself. I've already missed enough bedtimes. She inclined her head, neither pushing nor retreating. Presence isn't a place, Mark. It's an act. The generator sputtered, lights brightened a fraction, signaling repairs underway. I imagined track inspectors trudging through flooded marsh, torches slicing rain, people pressing forward into uncertainty because halting wasn't an option. Inside me, something similar trudged, a weary questioner picking through debris of old choices. Emilia laid her palm flat on the table between us. We leave the station at 4:50. Loudon Glen stop is 5:12. Decide by then. She closed her eyes, resting, as though the verdict belonged as much to the rails as to me. Outside, thunder receded eastward, and a ribbon of starlight briefly pierced the cloud ceiling, reflecting in the urn's polished side. I watched that fragile gleam travel across the metal until it reached my own mirrored silhouette and held there, waiting for agreement or refusal. The diesel engines stirred at last, shivering through the floorboards as if the whole train had drawn a fortifying breath. Headlights brushed drowned reeds on either side of the track, and somewhere ahead a whistle gave one tentative cry before fading into the drenched dark. Carriage lights brightened to their usual white hum. Passengers shifted, collecting scattered belongings, eager for forward motion to shrink the night. Emilia stirred from her half-sleep, pushing wayward hair behind her ear. The urn remained on her lap, a gravity I could almost see. We crawled across the marsh, water ghosting the windows in silver swirls. My phone buzzed, a calendar alert for the 8:30 risk briefing, followed by a string of corporate pings. I dismissed them, thumb hovering over a draft message to my wife. Delayed. Storms. Love you. I closed the screen instead. Any sentence felt both too large and too small for what churned inside. In the reflection, Emilia watched me, expression level. When she spoke, her voice slid easily between wheel clangs. I knew it was you the instant you stepped onto the platform. I met her gaze, surprise dissolved by something like inevitability. She continued, eyes on the night. Mark told me, your old studio mate, he handles the rail schedules for an installation downtown. I asked him which week you traveled, which carriage you favored. He thought it was an innocent reunion. Her smile was rueful. I orchestrated the entire collision. The admission unfurled a warm flare of indignation, but it flickered out as quickly as it came, replaced by admiration for her candor. I managed. You could have emailed. Her answer rode a sigh. Letters didn't work last time. She tilted the urn, catching emergency strip glow along the engraved roses. I wanted eye contact, not read receipts. The train gathered speed, wheels finding a steadier rhythm. Clouds thinned, a seam opened in the east, staining the horizon a bruised violet that promised dawn. Emilia leaned closer, her words dropping to a hush only the table could overhear. My mother forgave everyone but herself. I refuse that task. I needed you to decide whether ghosts get platform tickets to the future. She tapped the urn gently, a private code between grief and purpose. I folded my hands, knuckles pale. You deserved a goodbye, I said, hearing the simplicity of regret land like ballast. We fell silent as mile markers blurred past. I pictured Loudon Glen, chalk cliffs bluntly ending in cold surf, the spectral violet soon to ignite into gold. Could a man built from policies and disclaimers step onto such untidy ground? Could he shoulder someone else's sorrow and still find a path back to mortgage statements and children's lunchboxes? My heart beat yes and no in equal dissonant measure. At 4:50, the train hissed into the small coastal station. Only a single sodium lamp burned on the deserted platform, transforming rain puddles into molten coins. Doors slid aside. Briny air poured in, scented with kelp and distant wood smoke. Emilia rose first, swinging her tote and the urn with practiced care. She paused in the doorway, glanced back. Nothing pleading lurked in her expression, just an open parenthesis awaiting text. I stayed seated long enough to see my reflection alone on the window, briefcase upright on the floor like a chiding colleague. The whistle blew again, a breath away from departure. I stood. Night mist clung to us as we stepped onto the platform. Behind, the doors sighed shut like lips sealing a secret. I heard the engines throttle up, wheels biting rail, yet my legs did not move to follow. Emilia's shoulders relaxed fractionally. Relief or resolve, I couldn't tell. The train pulled away, carrying fluorescent rectangles of corporate urgency into the vanishing point, until only red taillights pulsed like distant heartbeats. We followed a footpath lit by wavering flashlight, mud soft under Oxfords never meant for heathland. My suit jacket clung with damp. Somewhere inland, a cockerel guessed at daylight. Emilia spoke little, saving breath for the climb. Cresting the final rise, the world widened into salt-riddled wind and an ocean yawning steel gray beneath the first slice of sun. Waves climbed the cliff face, exploded into confetti, retreated, tried again. Emilia knelt, placed the urn on a bed of wind-flattened thrift. She whispered something, perhaps a prayer, perhaps a color theory only her mother would grasp, then unclasped the lid. Ash rose in a sudden gust, catching the newborn light, scattering west in streaming veils that glowed rose gold before dissolving. I stepped beside her, no words necessary, pressing a steady palm to her back while gulls wheeled overhead like half-finished sketches. Minutes passed measured only by surf and heartbeat. When the urn lay empty, Emilia set it in a patch of harebells and stood. Tears glimmered on her lashes but never fell. She turned to me, eyes fierce with unshed thanks. "For what it's worth," she said, voice roughened by wind. "You made the harder choice today." I glanced at the distant rail line, invisible behind hills, and thought of the briefing slide deck growing colder in some conference queue. My phone chimed. A missed call, a fresh alert, then fell silent as I powered it off. Below, a local commuter horn echoed across the water, reminder that clocks still advanced, that other trains would keep schedules indifferent to cliffside rights. Emilia asked, "Will you catch the return?" I looked east, where the sky bloomed into layered apricot, felt the ocean's spray salt my lips, tasted possibilities unmodeled and unpriced. "Eventually," I said, "but not before coffee strong enough to etch spoons." She laughed, the sound mixing with gull cries, and began down the path toward the glow of a village waking up. I followed, lighter by a burden I hadn't known I carried, each step erasing one spreadsheet column of fear. Behind us, ash settled into sea, into memory, into whatever comes after endings when endings are finally spoken aloud. Some departures happen long after the train has stopped.